Every season of Survivor is a story. There are main characters, sidekicks, comic reliefs, and villains. A good season of Survivor tells a good story. It will grip you and have you rooting for someone and against someone else. You will want to tune in episode after episode to see what happens next until it all finishes with a hopefully satisfying conclusion. Each story we look at together will go through one character's journey from beginning to end, from the time they are introduced until they inevitably get their torch snuffed or win the game. We will look at every character moment and strategic move to determine whether they are a hero or a villain and whether they were a good or bad strategist. And with that in mind, welcome to Once Upon an Island. Before we start, I want to thank you all for supporting this channel. If you want to see these videos weeks before they get released on YouTube, then consider supporting this channel on Patreon. That Patreon also gives you access to the audio files for our Survivor podcast. They're posted here on YouTube, but if you want to download them and listen to them like a podcast, that's your best bet. With that out of the way, let's start the video. Welcome to the story of Lex Vandenberg, a castaway on Survivor Africa. As a preface, this video will only be observing what the TV show is showing us and what story is being told through the show. No future seasons will be mentioned, as the story and characters here have no idea and therefore are unaffected by those future seasons. All character moments and strategic moves are interpreted with the mindset of what that story is trying to tell us. All character moments and strategic moves are interpreted with the mindset of what the story is trying to tell us. I will not be interpreting it with a modern Survivor mindset. Therefore, someone flip-flopping in the Australian outback may be considered smart, but it would portray them as a villain. Whereas in a modern season, this would be smart and it would not reflect poorly on them as a person. But hold on a second, a correction needs to be made here. Normally I divide character moments between heroic and villainous, but there needs to be an exception made here, as Lex does not fit the profile of a hero. I would dare say that any positive character moments he has falls under the definition of anti-hero, which states a central character in a story, movie, or drama who lacks conventional heroic attributes. This may not make a lot of sense right now, but bear with me as we look and see how Lex toes the line between anti-hero and villain. With that out of the way, let's weave the tale of Lex Vandenberg of Survivor Africa.
39 days, 16 people, 1 survivor.
Lex Vandenberg, a 38-year-old father and marketing manager hailing from California, finished in 3rd place and was the dominant force of Survivor Africa. Lex took the game by the horns and rode the bull in a wide variety of directions. Everyone saw him as the frontrunner and he played up to those expectations. So why did he lose and why was he such a polarizing figure? Let's find out. Lex isn't truly introduced to us until halfway into the premiere episode. His tribe, Berghe, are in the middle of retrieving water from their watering hole, though calling it a watering hole is a generous name given that it's actually just a place where elephants take their dumps at, and there also happens to be water there. Lex introduces the audience to the dangers of drinking from there, but also introduces himself when he says,
"If you don't boil your water out here, you end up with what they call amoebic dysentery, which basically has you puking and crapping your guts out."
It is immunity time, and each tribe has to push a cart with fire to various checkpoints and light up those checkpoints. Lex and his tribe mate Ethan Zahn are leading the charge on the cart. Ethan trips many times, but not once does Lex show frustration or loss of patience with Ethan for doing so. So Berghe loses immunity and has to go to tribal that night. But let's circle back for a second here. Each tribe was given supplies at the beginning of the game that they would need to survive. Among those supplies were a few cans of food, such as cherry and beans. Earlier in the episode, everyone shared a can of cherries, and Ethan had actually noticed that Clarence Black had eaten 2 cherries at once, while everyone else ate 1 at a time. They were passing the can around, everyone was eating 1 at a time, and Clarence ate 2, and Ethan noticed. Now, we don't hear from Lex on this happening, meaning Lex either didn't notice or just wasn't important because Ethan told us about it. However, after the immunity challenge, everyone goes to the elephant dump watering hole except Diane, since she was feeling ill after the challenge, and Clarence, since he volunteered to look after her. While everyone is gone at the watering hole, Clarence and Diane eat a can of beans. We are never shown this happening, but Clarence and Diane tell us it did when everyone gets back.
Diane said the best thing to do would be to open and get her something to eat, you know, because we wanted to get her strength up. She said, well, maybe something to eat will help. So I said, well, I'll do that.
Now, people are mad at Clarence since he said he only opened it for Diane to make her feel better, but it's also discovered that it wasn't just for Diane, since Clarence had actually eaten some as well.
I got her something to eat, so we split it while she was gone, just so she could feel better what she does.
This makes Tom and Ethan upset, and they really got on Clarence's case, while Lex says that it's cut and dry.
You blew it, and we're pissed off, and we now need to deal with a situation where we were starting to build trust. The trust has been broken, and it needs to be built from square one.
What Clarence did was wrong, and he has broken the tribe's trust. While Ethan and Tom go off on a tangent about how the army would kick you out and shoot you for doing this, which is not true, Lex takes things in a manner that shows rational thought and does not spit venom at Clarence like Tom and Ethan are doing. Now, this Clarence and the can of beans issue is a lot more complex than what I laid out here, so that will be getting its own video in the immediate future. At Tribal, Lex votes for Diane since she is basically spent after that first immunity challenge and is not going to be helpful to the tribe in the future. This is the smart move, as Diane is the one receiving majority of the votes. The premiere of Survivor Africa shows us that Lex is a very rootable anti-hero who is not afraid to express what he is thinking, but he does seem to be level-headed when a situation arises. At first glance, he looks like a troublemaker, especially considering 2001 and how tattoos were not mainstream at the time. We don't see much strategy from him here, but choosing Diane over Clarence is the right move. At the start of episode 2, we hear from Lex about how it was decided that Big Tom would throw a vote on Clarence to send Clarence a message about how he was on shaky ground and the tribe hadn't forgotten what he had done.
For one of us to vote for Clarence, just to teach him a lesson, and just so that he knows that he's on shaky ground and that he needs to shape up.
This shows that Lex has a strong opinion on what he thinks is right and wrong, but this is actually a dumb strategic move since this could only hurt Baran in the future if they ever had a tie vote with Samburu, as shown in the previous season in the Australian Outback when there's a tie and Jeff goes home because he had a previous vote. So not a great idea here either. Later on in episode 2, Lex's tribe mate, Jessie Camacho, is dehydrated and cold, and it is clear to the tribe that she is suffering. While having a conversation with Tom, he says how Jessie says she is alright, even though she clearly isn't.
Well, you know, no one here is going to tell whether or not they're feeling all right. If they're feeling sick, they don't want to show anybody that they're weak because they figure we're just going to vote them off.
Lex points out that no matter how much someone is suffering, they're not going to admit it in this game since it's likely to get them, voted off. Lex is having a conversation with Ethan, which leads Lex offering him a 3-way alliance that includes Tom to go to the very end. Ethan seems to agree to it.
And I talked about our 3-way, agreement, you, him, and me.
Right after this, Ethan observes how everyone seems to like Lex, so it makes it easier for Lex to push things in the direction of his choosing, since people like him and they trust him. While this is good on Lex, it makes Ethan actually weary of him.
Everyone trusts Lex. He's on everyone's team right now. He's on everyone's side. Everyone likes him. That's why I'm a little paranoid. For all I know, Lex is playing both sides of the fence.
It is immunity time, and it is the gross food challenge, only this time, it isn't food. They're drinking cow blood, fresh and straight from the source, albeit mixed with some milk. Lex seems to actually enjoy drinking this.
How was it? Nice!
Despite this crazy performance from Lex, his tribe loses immunity and once again needs to vote someone out. At Tribal Council, Jeff asks Lex about the importance of trust. He expresses that trust is one of the most important facets of the game and that you have to trust those in your tribe to survive, no matter what.
Trust is probably one of the biggest issues of all. If you can't trust the people that you're with, that's a problem. And given the fact that we have had a couple of speed bumps, it's made it harder moving ahead.
Lex votes with the majority and gets rid of Jessie since she is weak and not a help to their tribe. Episode 3 is a quiet one for Lex, but we see the clear leadership role he has carved out for himself in the tribe when they're standing around talking about what to do when they see lions, which is a fairly common occurrence in this season. Lex says you have to stand still and not run away. If you run, then the lions will view you as prey, which is half right. When you see a lion, you're supposed to stand still and make yourself appear larger to scare them away. Staying still and looking scared won't do the job. But it seems like everyone listens to Lex, and that's the important part.
We need to stand absolutely still. I mean, as soon as you run away, you immediately throw a signal that you're prey.
Once again, episode 4 is quiet for Lex as the fear of the animals they are encountering is ever present. When coming back from the watering hole, they run across the most dangerous animal they could. Lex explains how this makes the experience all the more real, and it kind of puts them, meaning the castaways, in their place. It causes them to have a respect for the land since they are not the most dangerous ones there.
And we all know that that is the one animal that we need to be most careful. We're having these kind of sobering experiences that remind us every day that we need to respect the land.
Time for episode 5 and the first ever twist in Survivor, the tribe swap. Berghe and Samburu each send 3 of their members for reasons unknown, and they were blindsided to find out that the reason they sent them was to be swapped to the other tribe. Prior to the tribe swap, it was a 6-6 tie for the tribes. Each tribe had 6 members. Lex, Tom, and Kelly Goldsmith all swap over to Samburu, forming the new Samburu, which has each tribe now evenly split between 3 original and 3 new members. This is a downgraded position for Lex since he seemed to be firmly in the majority at Berghe. Almost immediately upon arriving at Samburu, Lex can plainly tell how lazy the Samburu tribe is based upon how the camp looks, and the tribe mates, well, the way they're acting. This gives him a good indication of what he has to put up with until the merge happens.
We were pissed about the fact that when we got there, it looked like a bunch of lazy people had been running the camp.
In an attempt to figure out who has votes against them so that they can utilize a tie vote to their advantage, Lex incorrectly thinks that Brandon has previously gotten votes against him, and Brandon does not have any votes against him.
I think Brandon's got at least a vote against him though.
You think that?
Episode 6 rolls around, and Samburu's laziness has extended beyond just having poorly handled equipment and not much firewood. Every night there is a rotation on fire watch so that the fire doesn't go out and animals try to eat them. Lex and Tom get stuck doing an extra long shift due to the Samburu members' laziness. However, unlike the former Samburu members, the ones that are now on Berghe, who would be obviously upset and take it out on the current members, Lex maintains a level head and acts mature about the whole situation.
It was painfully obvious the moment we stepped foot in camp here that, we had 3 people here that they were here for a little resort vacation.
The new Samburu tribe loses immunity, but not all is lost as Lex, Tom, and Kelly find out that Lindsay Richter has previously received votes. This ends up being a correct assessment as Lindsay is voted out when she is tied with Tom, who had no previous votes. Now let's quickly circle back to episode 5. In that episode, the new Berghe voted out an old Samburu member, putting them up 6-5. But with this vote, getting rid of Lindsay, the old Berghe is up 6-4 over the original Samburu, putting Lex in a great strategic position come the merge.
It's time for you to go.
It's episode 7 and the merge is coming and everyone knows it. But that doesn't matter to Lex as he is working on something important, something possibly game-changing. That's right, he is working on an Uber spoon. Now it's not quite the Super Bowl 2000 that Dr. Sean made in Borneo, but it's still something.
You know what I'm calling it? Uber spoon. You know what Uber means? The ultimate.
For the first time all season, someone says they don't really like Lex, but unfortunately this comes from Kelly, and not a Samburu member. She says she would vote him out since she finds him annoying if there wasn't a merge incoming soon.
Just watching him make spoons for Tom and kiss ass to everybody and talk in his dad voice annoys me. Am I the only one who notices he's a totally weird person? It's annoying. I would like to vote off Lex in a perfect world if I thought there was going to be no merger ever.
The tribes have merged and they are working on the all-important tribe name. Lex ends up naming it, and it seems like everyone has issues with pronouncing it, or they simply don't care. This is not for or against Lex, but something humorous that he ended up causing.
Majimoto means hot water.
It's Moto Maja or something along those lines.
I really don't care about the name. I think that's all kind of cornball anyway. I don't give a one way or the other. Didn't care. They could have named it, you know, Theaters Anonymous. I could care less.
Something like Moto Java or something like that. M-O-T-O?
Moto Maji? Moto Magi? Momo Magi? I don't know.
Moto Maji.
She needed a little booze.
I might even start breakdancing.
This is nice.
Okay, cut the dead arm.
Teresa Cooper, or sometimes called T-Bird, of the original Sambaru wins individual immunity, and since Braun is up 6-4, they decide, hey, they can afford it, and they're going to get rid of Clarence since they think he's worth cutting. This has been coming though since at least episode 1 with the whole cherry and the beans incident. Lex decides the honorable thing to do would be to tell Clarence he's going home before Tribal, which may be honorable, but it's also really dumb.
I didn't want to lie to you about anything, and I wanted to tell you just face to face that we've all decided to vote you off today. And
as if that's more ethical, because Lex is like, well, I can't bold-faced lie to him.
Lex then has a conversation with Kim Johnson, an original Braun member, and afterwards she tells us she is guarded when talking with him and suspects he may be playing both sides, which is an incorrect assumption, but it seems like his assertive way of talking has her on edge.
I don't like being told what to do. I don't know at this point that Lex is playing both ends against the middle, but I'm a little bit guarded with all that.
So T-Bird made a promise to not vote for Clarence, and everyone else is voting for him. So she decides to vote with Clarence for Lex, which is no good if a tie comes up in the future with Lex's name attached. But the bigger point to be made here is that, like Kim Johnson, Teresa is also nervous by Lex, and she labels him a target.
I think you're a wonderful, fascinating person, but your leadership strength and skills make me a little nervous for down the road, so I'm giving you my vote.
So with the vote, Lex and everyone else, minus T-Bird, vote out Clarence and subsequently make Braun's advantage over Sambaru a mere 5-4.
Tribe has spoken.
Episode 8 is a recap episode, so we're not going to look at it since it isn't part of the overall story, as much as it is simply bonus content like you would find on a movie's DVD or Blu-ray. Episode 9 begins and Lex is on a warpath. He figured that Clarence would vote for him, but he thinks whoever casts the second vote is a snake. This causes him to express strong emotions about how he wants to cut their throats, and he does not keep this to himself.
I will not live with a snake.
Yeah.
I will cut the head off of whoever it is that did this. I'm gonna slit their throats.
At this point in the game, I'm worried about the fact that there's a snake amongst us, and I don't know who it is. That person could act like cancer, and that's why we need to smoke them out.
Kelly tells us what she thinks about Lex's reaction to this extra rogue vote, and she says he is quite egotistical.
Lex was just a total jerk. I mean, what do you expect in this game? I mean, I'm sorry. Someone voted against you, Mr. Ego. Deal with it.
Brandon Quitten follows this up by saying he also thinks Lex is egotistical and wishes he had put this vote on him since it caused such a strong reaction by Lex.
Somebody was just screwing with his head, and it worked. Makes me wish I had done it.
A little later, Lex is talking to Teresa about that rogue vote that he got, and he's trying to figure out who could have possibly been. Without asking her if it was her, he tells her he doesn't suspect her, and of course, looks like a fool since he is wrong.
The moment I met you, I knew that I trusted you, and I trust my gut over my eyes any day. My gut told me that you're the real deal.
Later on in episode 9, it's now 2 days later after all that discussion about the rogue vote, but Lex is still hung up on it and who it could have been.
There was that mystery vote, and my goal was in 3 days to figure out who it was that cast that vote.
After having some conversations with Brandon, Lex suspects that it may have been Kelly who backstabbed him.
And he heard Kelly talking to Frank and T-Bird, and he distinctly heard her say the words, "free agent."
Just a quick reminder that Brandon is a former Sambaru member and Kelly is a Braun member. This is of course an incorrect assumption about Kelly since she didn't backstab him and T-Bird did.
There is absolutely no doubt in my mind now that Kelly's turning.
Lex then offers Brandon a deal. Let's vote out Kelly tonight, and then after that, Brandon can replace the hole in Lex's alliance that Kelly's departure will leave. This is an easy thing for Brandon to say yes to, but it seems to be an ill thought out plan. If Kelly goes home, then the numbers are even 4-4. Sambaru could band together and vote out Lex or Tom since they both have past votes.
So I talked to Brandon. I said, look, I would like you to take Kelly's spot as our 5th member. My gut tells me without doubt that I can trust him.
Lex follows up the conversation with Brandon by talking to Kelly and making her feel like she's being targeted that night, even though she had no reason to think this was happening before. It is time to vote at Tribal Council, and Lex is the first one up. He votes for Kelly and really lays into her.
But I smell a rat, and my gut tells me that you stabbed me in the back and you're playing both sides. And if that's the case, then good riddance.
Brandon votes for Kelly as well, which means that Lex did successfully flip him. This is a dumb move that Lex has him targeting her in the first place, but it shows that Lex can swing a Sambaru member against their best interest. Want to talk about blindsides? The old Sambaru and Kelly all vote for Lex, and while Kelly does go home 5-4, Lex was a Brandon not being flipped vote from going home himself. Lex dug himself into a hole that got him 4 votes, but he dug himself out just enough to not go home. This is still a dumb move, as it is now 4-4 for each tribe.
The tribe has spoken.
Episode 10 does not relent with the focus being squarely on Lex. He opens the episode by telling us that trust is the foundation of the game of Survivor and in life. That's his view, and it's repeating what he said in a previous episode at Tribal Council.
Who do you trust and who do you believe? And you know, that's kind of the, when you think about it in life, that's kind of the foundation that you base everything on.
While talking with Ethan, Lex defends his decision to be loyal to Brandon for saving his butt. Lex aggressively says he will back those who back him.
Brandon saved our skin, and if I think that both Brandon and Frank are sure bets to vote for each other, I'll go for the guy that did me a favor.
Now, he is right that Brandon saved their alliance by flipping, but the reality of the situation is that they never should have targeted Kelly in the first place, but this is not discussed as a mistake. Later on, we hear from Lex about how Frank had approached him about being in an alliance. Lex told Frank no, which is the wrong thing to do, as you always say yes to people wanting to work with you, but apparently Lex now hates Frank as he dogpiles on him. This comes across as justified from an emotional standpoint, but it seems like Lex's emotions may be controlling his rational decision making. Ethan approaches Lex since he is a little worried about this newfound alliance Lex has with Brandon. Ethan asks him if his word with Brandon is more important than his word with Ethan and Tom. And Lex says yes. This is not good and seems like Lex favors a more "what have you done for me lately" approach, though Ethan and Tom have always voted with Lex, so it's not very clear why Brandon is now more valued than them. But what it does do is put Ethan on edge and worried about Lex. At the immunity challenge, Lex wins, marking his first individual win of the season, and he needed it considering the shaky ground he is currently standing on. After the win, Lex says that the longer he's in the game, the more he's locked in and desiring to stay and win.
I have a lot invested, and the longer you're out here, the more you want to go all the way. I mean, it becomes less and less an option to take that long walk, you know, out of the game. You want to stay.
Right after that, Lex is talking to Tom about voting off Frank instead of Brandon, but Tom seems to be unswayed. While trying to convince Tom, Lex vilifies Frank while saying Brandon may help them again. It comes across very emotional, and Tom doesn't seem to share the sentiment with Lex. This vilification of Frank seems similar to Colby's vilification of Jerry or Keith in a previous season, except here, it doesn't seem justified. Frank is Frank, but he's not a hated villain like Jerry was perceived to be. At Tribal Council, Jeff asks Lex about how he makes decisions, and Lex goes on to say that he makes decisions based on what his gut says, and his gut doesn't lie, and it's pretty accurate. This is of course proven untrue by the Kelly boot from the previous episode. Lex votes for Frank and continues his dogpiling of him.
You have been nothing but rude, grouchy, and a poor sport, and the last few days with you have been insufferable. Bottom line, you've been a real downer.
As it turns out, his alliance did not agree that Frank needed to go home, and neither did Sambaru, as everyone votes for Brandon, except Lex and of course Brandon. This is a lucky break for the Braun tribe, as this easily could have been a vote where Tom could have gone home on previous votes.
The tribe has spoken.
At the start of episode 11, it's still all about Lex, except this time, it's Ethan planting seeds about how Lex may not be as trustworthy as he appears since he abandoned his alliance in favor of Brandon. Ethan says this really pushes the boundaries and limits of their alliance.
Lex's vote, I think, just pushed the limits of our alliance. It kind of redefined how tight our bonds were.
Tom is talking to Ethan about Lex, and Tom says, well, he feels betrayed by Lex and that the alliance is now jeopardized because he didn't vote with Ethan and Tom.
We had an alliance between him and Ethan, and the alliance was that we'd vote together, and Lex jeopardized that alliance.
Despite all of this drama, it's time for the Survivor auction, and Lex wins coffee and a croissant. Not a big deal really, but Ethan seems genuinely excited for Lex, and Ethan doesn't do sarcasm or really much humor, so it seems legitimate.
Sold to Lex. Come on up and take a sample.
Lex.
Yeah, Lex.
How is it?
Smile, buddy, smile.
After the auction, Lex tells us how he was noticing how people were interacting at the auction. It gave him a good indication of relationship and even strategic alliances.
In the fruit auction, you could definitely see alliance lines and relationship lines that apply to the game itself.
And within that, he noticed who all the partners were and saw that Kim Powers was all by herself. But also at that auction, Lex started to notice that Tom is a shrewd wheeler and dealer. He says he's always known that Tom is a lot smarter than he lets on. After all, Tom wants people to think he's just a silly hayseed farmer from Virginia who's simple and stupid, but he's actually really smart and utilizes that persona to endear people to him. Not long after that, we see Tom bathing Kim Powers, which is really just him dumping water on her while she opens up her bathing suit to it while laughing. Lex says that Tom can basically get away with murder out here, and Kim Johnson explains that, yeah, that kind of is the case. Tom is harmless, so no one views it as a big deal. The immunity challenge is another favorable one for Lex as he wins again and ensures he stays off the hot seat for just one more tribal.
Lex wins immunity again.
At Tribal Council, it's a clean sweep on Frank as Lex votes with the majority once again.
Tribe has spoken.
Any signs that a flip could have happened and Braun is gone as they are now up 4-2. Episode 12 starts us off with a special family-centered reward challenge. All of the castaways get to see a video from their loved ones, and this immediately causes Lex to have a strong emotional reaction when he sees the tape of his two sons and wife.
I love you so much. I love you more than ice cream.
So the actual challenge is a fun one, as Jeff Probst asks a question and the castaways guess what their loved one is going to answer to that question. Jeff asks Lex what is his most embarrassing moment, and Lex tells a lighthearted story about how back in college he maybe drank a little too much one night, and then the next day he was in class, in his human sexuality class, and
All right, Lex, most embarrassing moment.
Well, back in college I used to go to a lot of happy hours, and one time I got a little too happy, and I threw up in the middle of my human sexuality class.
It's also fun that his wife got this one right. So Lex ends up winning the reward, and Jeff says pick one person to go with. Lex picks Tom, and it seems like this could be an attempt to get back in Tom's good graces, but nothing is ever confirmed on camera. It's still a smart choice though.
I'm gonna take Big Tom.
All right, you guys are going to the Masai Mara.
I'll be the best date you ever had.
On the reward, Tom ends up getting a little drunk, and Lex has to be the responsible one and put him to bed. This is a funny scene, but also interesting to see how Lex has become the responsible one since that time he threw up in a college class. The next morning, him and Tom get to go on a hot air balloon trip, and they get really excited about seeing a lion hunt and kill a wildebeest.
Look, go on here. Oh, look at that. Look, the hunt.
Oh my God.
Wow. Oh my God.
Just holding his mouth right on top of that wildebeest there. Where there were two wildebeest, there's now one.
At the immunity challenge, the contestants are trying to break each other's pots. Teresa and Kim Powers show visible excitement that Lex's pots get hit and that he loses. At first glance, it seems like it's just because Lex had maybe won the previous two immunities, but when he doesn't win, Teresa tries to flip Kim Johnson and Tom to vote out Lex, which means Lex is still a big target on the board. This is followed up by Tom saying he's still mad at Lex even though he took him on the reward. This seems to be more of a Tom thing. Tom doesn't really forgive and forget that easily, as proven by the Clarence issue and how Tom still voted for him longer than anyone else really wanted him to.
I'm still irritated at Lex. I don't think he did me right. I felt like that Lex betrayed me, and he knows my feelings on that.
However, this is still bad for Lex strategically. This flip by Teresa is unsuccessful as Kim Powers goes home and Braun is firmly leading 4-1. Lex stayed safe without the safety of an immunity necklace, meaning his social game saved him.
Kim, the tribe has spoken.
Episode 13 begins in a most unusual fashion. An elephant has taken a dump right in their watering hole. Obviously not good, and you may recall Lex talking about the dangers of this in episode 1.
You don't boil your water out here, you end up with what they call amoebic dysentery, which basically has you puking and crapping your guts out.
And 12 episodes later, Lex's charming crassness has not changed a bit.
We got an elephant disrespecting our spring. I mean, he could have picked anywhere. Might as well just put his butt right over the spring.
Later on, the tribe is given letters from home, and this just reinforces Lex's love for his family.
I had letters from my wife, from my 2 sons, from my mother, my father. It doesn't get any better than that.
Similar to the challenge beast Colby of last season, Lex wins the car reward, and this is win number 4 for him so far. However, this is taking a toll on people, and they are really getting tired of his dominance. Ethan expresses how this makes him annoyed and jealous of Lex. He wants to root for him, but it's finding it tough as he doesn't want him to win anymore.
Chevy Avalanche, it's all yours.
So I was annoyed and a little pissed off and trying to be happy for Lex, but deep down inside I wasn't that happy. I just don't want him to win anymore.
Today, there was a little bit of animosity towards Lex on winning that truck.
So on that reward with the vehicle that Lex just won, him and Jeff Probst go to a local village with the truck and deliver medical supplies. While Lex did not have a hand in this decision being made, this was a Survivor production decision, it still casts him in a favorable light. Immediately after this, Kim approaches Ethan about possibly getting rid of Lex. For the past 2 episodes, Teresa has tried to flip Kim to no avail, but here it seems to be the fruits of her labor are finally paying off. After coming back from the reward challenge, Lex senses a weird vibe back at camp. He recognizes that there's a general sourness over the fact that he won the truck.
I was gone most of the day. When I got back, the vibe was thick at camp. There was some strange stuff going down. The mojo was just funky.
So after 4 wins, 2 being immunity and 2 being a reward, Lex wins his 3rd immunity challenge, and while winning it certainly is a catch-22, he needed it more than letting someone else win it.
There it is! Nice shot.
Not long after the challenge, Teresa knows she is going home and goes all in on one last ditch effort to save herself. She endears herself to Lex by confessing that she was the rogue vote from back in episode 7, which Lex takes in stride, but she also tries pinning Tom by saying he was planning on voting Lex out. This is a half-truth, as he was going to vote Lex out if Teresa could get the numbers, but she leaves out that bit of information. This makes Lex mad that Tom would even consider flipping on him, and he says he will cut Tom's throat if this is true.
And if I think that he's in a situation where he's about to screw me over and stab me in the back, I'll cut his throat.
At Tribal Council, it seems like the jury is making a statement. As it turns out, they are not happy with Lex calling their walk the walk of shame. Instead of apologizing for this, he instead defends himself by explaining why he calls it that.
That was actually a term that was coined a long time ago and was kind of the common term that we all used around the camp anyway.
Teresa is voted out, and this was the best decision Lex could make in this lose-lose scenario.
Teresa, the tribe has spoken.
Finale time, and it begins as most of these later episodes do, with Lex. He explains how Survivor is like a 39-day puzzle, and when someone gives you a little bit of information, like what Teresa did, then it makes other puzzle pieces fall into place that he had no idea what to do with before.
And sometimes when one person says something to you, like what T-Bird said to me before Tribal Council, all of a sudden, some of the loose puzzle pieces you find the spot that they fit in.
Lex tells Ethan that Tom was actually planning on getting rid of him, and Kim Johnson confirms this, putting all eyes on Tom instead of Lex like it had been for the previous 4 or 5 episodes. Later on, Lex explains how his brain is constantly thinking about if anyone's trying to burn him. Is this person trying to burn him? Is that person trying to burn him? While it is good that he's staying very aware and not just getting complacent, it should be that he's actually being very aware of what everyone is thinking in general. Like, what is their best move? What are they trying to do next? And not just the black and white of, are they just trying to burn Lex?
But more now than ever, our brains are focused on, well, is there anyone trying to burn me?
He then tries to clear the air with Tom, but goes about it in an aggressive manner that doesn't end up helping him at all.
It was only fair and right for me to say that none of us had votes against us, and I talked to you about it before I talked to Brandon about it, and you said that was the fair thing to do. I'm not here because anybody carried me along. No one carried me here.
This is proven when we hear from Tom saying that he thinks Lex is being paranoid.
The thing between me and Lex is basically a case of paranoia. My alliance with Lex and Ethan has not, has not quivered.
As with the Australian Outback finale, the remaining contestants take a hike up to an overlook and reflect upon their time in Africa. Lex says that he's been touched by this experience. The final 4 immunity seems like another do or die for Lex, but he doesn't actually win it. Kim does, and as it turns out, his telling Ethan about Tom, along with Kim confirming it, seems to be what sends Tom to the jury, despite the clear target Lex has been all throughout the merge, showing that Lex's social game can save him when needed.
Tom?
Good idea, thank you.
Tribe spoken.
Nothing much happens until after the final 3 immunity challenge. It is Ethan versus Kim versus Lex. The classic hand on a hard idol. Whoever wants it the most will win. And unfortunately for Lex, he is going into this challenge with a huge disadvantage. Basically,
you don't boil your water out here, you end up with what they call amoebic dysentery, which basically has you puking and crapping your guts out.
Lex had problems with his stomach all night last night. He was up like 10 times going to the bathroom.
That's right. The thing he said in episode 1 is now happening to him, but he still perseveres on. Ethan drops first, and after 3 hours and 21 minutes, Lex drops as well, putting Kim in the power position to pick who she wants to sit against at the end. So all season, we've actually seen Kim be close to Ethan with Ethan protecting her. Think of Kim as an extension of the Ethan, Lex, and Tom alliance, though it never sounded like she was supposed to make it past 4th place. With that, Lex is voted out by her and subsequently misses a surefire win against Kim if he had won that last challenge or had been closer to her than Ethan had been.
Lex, tribe has spoken.
The next day, Kim explains her rationale on why she picked Ethan over Lex, and she states this is basically because Lex seemed entitled. Now, we never see Lex actually act entitled in the show, but we do see him winning a lot of challenges, which could give an aura of being entitled.
But I feel that Lex thought he deserved it. I'm not so sure that Ethan felt he deserved it.
So let's break this down. How is Lex Vandenberg as a character? Lex was entertaining and complex, while previous big characters such as Richard Hatch and Colby Donaldson were a bit more straightforward. Lex seemed to have a lot more layers. He was a straight shooter who wore his heart on his sleeve and loved his family and trusted his feelings to guide him with his relationships, and he was the season's narrator and sometimes carried the season on its back to keep it from too many dry spells. Unlike Colby, Lex did not fit the hero prototype, but he filled a solid anti-hero role along with occasionally being a villain. Although Lex was never truly a villain. Out of 37 character moments shown on the show, 25 were anti-heroic and 12 were villainous, making Lex Vandenberg an anti-hero in Survivor Africa. Now, how was Lex as a strategist? He was really a mixed bag in this regard. His social game saved him even when he should have been the biggest target on the board, namely at that final 4 immunity. He made it to final 3 without immunity saving him every time. Though when he needed immunity, he got it. If he hadn't been sick at that final immunity challenge, Lex had an excellent shot at winning the entire season. He was smart, but he let his emotions control his decision making far too many times. Out of 62 strategic moments shown on the show, 26 were smart and 36 were dumb, making Lex a dumb strategist in Survivor Africa. Next time on Once Upon an Island, we tackle a fun subject. We look at Big Tom's top 10 funniest moments in Survivor Africa.
Ham, he's a Jew and he won't eat the ham. He's a Jew. He's a Jew.
Thanks for watching, and if you like the content you see here, then please support me and this channel on Patreon. That Patreon has every video I release weeks earlier than when they end up here on YouTube, along with access to the audio files of my Survivor podcast for you to download. Thank you for your support.
Lex, Travis spoke.